How's it going, lazy persons? I'm Sixkilla. Welcome back to Root Double. We have finished repairing Mr. Ukita's memories. Hopefully, he's all better now, and then we can move on to the next person in the list. I don't know who that's going to be. I assume it's the first person Watase comes into contact with when he leaves the room. I guess we'll find out. Natsuhiko and Yuri returned to reality. Ukita was still unconscious. Watase looked at Natsuhiko and Yuri from the side. You guys done? Yeah, how long did we take? Well, only about 5 minutes, give or take. From an objective perspective, the entire affair only took a small amount of time. Within that time, Natsuhiko and Yuri had had their second encounter with Subject N and erased her once again. And suddenly, pain ran through Natsuhiko's head. He held his head and leaned against the wall. What? What's wrong, Hikarin? My head. What, are you okay, Natsuhiko? The headache felt like the one he'd had when he arrived at Labo this morning. But it was subtly different. A bizarre discomfort shook his brain alongside the pain, and his 5 senses hazed over as well. What the hell? It's like molten lava's pouring into my head. Lava in your head? It can't be the after effects of contact with N. Natsuhiko gasped at Yuri's suggestion. That was very possible, come to think of it. When Subject N came into contact with people, she instantly destroyed their personalities, turning them into almost completely different people. Coming into contact with her brought the risk of her corroding into you. The truth of the matter was that Subject N inside of Watase and the Subject N inside of Ukita both tried to corrode into Natsuhiko. Natsuhiko shook off her malice and erased her both times, but coming into contact with her multiple times in a row could be a lot more dangerous than I thought, couldn't it? In such a short span of time, Natsuhiko had fought twice with an opponent who was trying to corrupt him, which turned out to be even more of a mental and psychological burden on him than he'd expected. Watase and Yuri looked at Natsuhiko's face with concern. Hikarin, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Natsuhiko forced a smile as he answered. More importantly, are you okay, Yuri? I think I'm okay. It wasn't as if I directly connected to Mr. Ukita's mind, after all. Ian only came into contact with me indirectly through you, so influence was minimal, I guess. I see, that's good then. It appeared that Natsuhiko served as a sort of padding for her. At any rate, as long as Yuri was okay, Natsuhiko was fine with that. And with that thought in mind, he shook his head and slapped his cheeks. Which ones? His senses soon came back to him. He still had a headache, but it faded considerably. Yeah, it looks like I can keep going, no problem. No problem? You sure you're okay, Natsuhiko? You're as pale as a ghost, you know. Some of the others have been infected with malice too. Are you sure you can keep up with the erasure? Yeah, I can. Keep them coming. Natsuhiko gave a strained display of bravado. At any rate, this is not the time to give up, because if Natsuhiko couldn't do it, then Yuri would have to be his replacement. More importantly, we need to make sure if Mr. Ukita's malice has disappeared or not. I think we're probably good, but better safe than sorry. Yeah, that's true. Guess I'll try and wake him up. Old man, wake up, old man. After a few slaps on the cheek, Ukita finally groaned. Good, he's awake. Captain Kasasagi? Ukita looked around with vacant eyes. Mr. Ukita, are you okay? How do you feel? I mean, do you feel like malice is dispersed from within your mind or anything? Huh? Natsuhiko and Yuri are here too? And that's Marshito over there. What in the world? Ukita's eyes widened. From the look of it, Subject N's malice had faded from him. Natsuhiko sighed in relief and answered his questions. It's a long story, but Natsuhiko summarized the situation Ukita had been put into. How Subject N had used the ability known as Sense Sympathy on Ukita to manipulate his memories and amplify his malice, and how Natsuhiko and Yuri were also Sense Sympathy users, and thus were the only ones who could cancel out that malice. Once he finished hearing Natsuhiko's explanation, Ukita muttered with a bitter look on his face. So in other words, my personality was overwritten with BC. I think that's an appropriate way to put it. I see. So it's an ability far more powerful than we imagined. Ukita spoke regretfully, and then looked at Watase with a gasp. Then does that mean the same happened to Captain Kasasagi? Yeah, well, something like that. After Subject N amplified my malice, I shot at the kids. So Natsuhiko erased all my memories in self-defense. He then finally restored my memories for me just a little bit ago, you see. I see. Ukita muttered that with a complicated look on his face. Who else do you suppose is still infected with malice? I'd say the most likely candidates are Jin and Miss Tachibana. Wait a second, what about Salyu? That girl came at me with an axe, you know. Natsuhiko thought for a second. Salyu may have a slightly eccentric personality, But would she go so far as to take such drastic measures? The possibility that Sully's infected with malice isn't completely out of the question. To be honest, he was frightened by the thought. Sully already had a dangerous side to her. If she were infected with malice, her actions would become truly unpredictable. In that case, who's the most dangerous of them all? That would be Mortabe, wouldn't it? Huh? Why would Jin be... To be honest, about 2 hours ago I attacked her from behind and stole her bullets from her. You what? Why would you do such a thing? Well, I thought I'd need a weapon if I wanted to oppose Captain Kasasagi. And I had the gun, so... It's very possible that she's bearing a grudge against me now. Now Natsuhiko understood the reason Jun's head was bleeding and why she was wandering around with the engine cutter in hand. Oh, and to make matters worse, that same gun got snatched by Teach. By Professor Tsubakiyama? Teach was the one who had the gun to begin with. We split it up into 3 parts, but I guess it all got back into Teach's hands in the end. Those words made Natsuhiko uncomfortable. Hold on a second, Watase. About the gun Professor Tsubakiyama had. Was that one of the guns you guys prepared? No, it wasn't. The guns me, Dojima, and Hiyama had were NZ-75s, 3 in total. But the gun Teach had seems to be a different gun. What, then where did the gun come from? There shouldn't have been any guns in lab other than the 3 that Watase's comrades had brought in. And yet Ena had a gun, which meant it's most likely Teach's personal gun. She was probably lying about finding it in Labo. Natsuhiko was aghast. Why would an ordinary high school teacher like Ena have her own gun? Because she's obviously not an ordinary high school teacher. If she was neither a terrorist nor with Labo, then who in the world is Professor Tsubakiyama? Once Natsuhiko said that, Yuri's eyes widened as if she'd figured something out. Maybe she's actually with Security Sector 6. Security Sector 6? Yuri nodded as Natsuhiko and Watase tilted their heads in puzzlement. They're a secret section of the Rokume City Security Department in charge of cover-ups. As Labo's pawns, they do a variety of dirty work. They perform cover-ups of Labo-related affairs, including communicator abduction, among other things. That's a thing? You saw it in my memory too, didn't you? Remember how after the fire 9 years ago, those people forced their way into the hospital and tried to take me away to Labo? That was Security Sector 6. Now that she mentioned it, the name had shown up in Ukita's memory too. Furthermore, Natsuhiko remembered hearing rumours of them back in his childhood. Rokume City's 7 Wonders, number 6. Monsterified people are captured by a secret task force working under Rokume City's security department and are imprisoned underground. Those rumours were true? All of them have turned out to be true so far. Now he finally felt that all of the 7 Wonders had a hidden meaning behind them. Could those have been no mere urban legends, but rather something someone had intentionally tried to spread? Was it a way to disguise the sinister truth as a simple child's gag? Or was it a conspiracy someone had tried to leak to the public? As Natsuhiko pondered that question, Ukita spoke up. Indeed, I've heard of them before, or I guess I should say it's only a matter of course that they exist. Such underhanded forces only come naturally with such high interest facility and organisation as this one. Normally, you would commission an organisation or enterprise to fulfill that role, but in Labo's case, the city itself goes through the lengths to provide such services. This all sounds like a bad joke. Well, it's not just Labo whose ethics are broken. The Rokume City's government is in cahoots with them too, after all. Natsuhiko ground his teeth as he heard that. Up until now, he'd loved the town he was born and raised in. That didn't change even when Ena told him about the truth of the world and how Rokume City was a fortress built to protect communicators from that world. He had thought that the security department and the surveillance cameras were all to protect the townspeople. But even the city's an enemy too, isn't it? Both Labo and the city government were working in cahoots to create this abnormal world, weren't they? Perhaps his dabbling in Watase and Ukita's memories had intensified that bitter feeling of his. Natsuhiko suddenly remembered the time he was in front of the city gate with Salia. Kind of an off-putting place. Huh, you think so? Almost gives the impression that the whole city is locked down. Her words are on the mark. Ever since he got stuck in Labo, Natsuhiko had wanted to get out. But outside of that birdcage was just a bigger prison. Rokume City itself. So Professor Tsubakiyama's teaching job is just a temporary front, and she's actually part of the Rokume City Security Department. Is she working to ensure that we don't escape? There's no conclusive evidence of that, but if she works for the city government, slipping undercover as the Rokume Academy teacher should be no problem at all. And then she'd be able to put the students under close surveillance to see if any of the communicators demonstrate sense sympathy. Indeed, it wouldn't be strange at all if someone were there to have that role. But Even if she had an undercover role, she still normally worked as a teacher, you know? So why would she come to Labo today? I don't know that much. Perhaps she had a hunch about the terrorist information. Or perhaps it was just a coincidence. We did tell her about the terrorist plot. In any case, now that she's here, she might be working to help cover everything up. Thinking along those lines, there were several things that came to mind. Like how she had closed her heart to the kids. How she'd recommended they turn themselves into the security department when the kids were running away from them. Is Professor Tsubakiyama with the security department? Then that means when she heard about the terrorist plot from us, she must have got on guard and concluded they'd come to Labo. Eventually, Watase broke his silence with a sigh and spoke up. So the point is, we should assume everyone's dangerous regardless of if they're infected with malice or not. Yeah, but nevertheless, everyone needs to be brought here. In that case, who should we take care of next? Upon hearing that question, Natsuhiko quickly thought of Salia. Since she'd been acting independently this entire time, she most likely had less information to work with than everyone else. She could get dragged into a fight without understanding any of the circumstances and get hurt. Watase, please bring Salia here first. What? Don't make it sound so simple. She tried to kill me once, you know. I know, but you just need to bring her here. She might be hostile to you, but she's my friend. I'm sure if you explain the situation to her, she'll come down here with you. There's no guarantee of that at all, is there? She might attack me out of the blue the moment we come across each other. That's what she's done every other time we've come across each other. I don't think you've considered my risk here. You might risk getting hurt a little, but just bear with it. It's your actions that escalated things to this point after all. Those words were meant to get Watase to do some reflection and change his intentions, but both Watase and Yuri furrowed their eyebrows. Hikaden, that was a little much, don't you? But Watase himself just cut in with an awkward smile, interrupting Yuri. No, I don't mind Yuri, I'll do what Natsuhiko says. He's the mastermind here. There's no going against what he says to do. Watase glared at Natsuhiko as he spoke. But just so you know, Natsuhiko, I'm not your pawn. I'm a living human being, and don't you forget it. What, are you trying to say you don't want to go? That's not the issue at all. What bothers me is what's further down the line. Once I brought everyone here and the malice erasure is complete, you no longer have a use for me. You're just going to erase my memory again, aren't you? Natsuhiko's heart skipped a beat. What makes you say that? I can tell that much even without using BC. After all, our minds were connected at one point. We'll erase it if you want, for all I care. Just know the moment you do, that makes you a monster in the truest sense of the word. What? Watase ignored Natsuhiko's speechlessness and spoke up. Okay, guess I'll go look for Salia now. Old man, stay here and protect the kids. What? Me? Protect them? But... I know, that's why I'm leaving you with this. Watase took the gun out of his pocket and handed it to Ukita. This is my gun. It's low on bullets, but at least it has a magazine. Use this if absolutely necessary, but don't aim to hit. Use it as a threat only. Okay. Ukita nervously took the gun. Okay, I'll be going then. As Watase said that and began to leave, Natsuhiko called out to him. Hey, hold up, Watase. What is it this time? Are you sure you'll be fine without a gun? Don't worry, I got these guns right here. Watase slapped his right bicep and smiled boldly. And before Natsuhiko could say anything, Watase left the shelter. Once Watase left, the shelter went quiet. After a short moment of silence, Yuri murmured, Captain Kasasagi looks like he's really pushing himself hard. Natsuhiko's heart twinged slightly in pain at those words. Ever since he'd returned Watase's memories, they'd begun cooperating only because they happened to share a common interest. But their relationship before that seemed to be far better in Natsuhiko's eyes. It was far better back when their minds were connected and they sought a way to survive together. But it's not like I'm opposing him because I want to or anything. If I don't speak out against him like that, I'm sure he'll never change his lines of thought. Huh? Don't tell me you did that for me. Yeah, I want him to reconsider his plan to take you away, that's all. His plan to what? Captain Kasasagi still hasn't given up on fulfilling his mission as a member of Q? No, he hasn't. I want to put a stop to him. I can't let him take Yuri away. I see, that really does sound like something he'd do, though. But still, I don't like it. When you and Captain Kasasagi fight, Hikaden. Despite Yuri's complaints, Natsuhiko still couldn't help it. Watase had his sights firmly set on fulfilling his mission with Q. Natsuhiko had his sights firmly set on protecting Yuri and everyone else. As long as those firm beliefs remained incompatible, a compromise between Natsuhiko and Watase was impossible. Damn it, I went through the trouble of erasing his malice, so why can't we come to a complete understanding? As Natsuhiko muttered to himself, Ukita asked him a question. By the way, Natsuhiko, about that malice. Huh? You said that Subject N amplifies the malice of others by manipulating their memories and propagating their will. Is that correct? Yes. Were you not aware that she'd done so either, Mr. Ukita? Not at all. Not until just now, that is. Ukita sighed. Naturally, I remember all of the actions I took when I was infected with malice. But when I think about it now, it all feels like it happened in a dream. I guess that's the truly terrifying part about Subject N. Indeed, but what's more terrifying is the me during the time my malice was amplified still certainly felt like me. Huh? It's not my fault victims turned up, it's all Captain Kasasagi's fault. It wasn't Subject N who had that thought, but my consciousness. The realization of just how small and cowardly I am was truly frightening. Natsuhiko understood the meaning behind Ukita's words. No matter how good a person may be, perhaps not a single one is completely free from malice. And those who came into contact with Subject N came to know their true selves whether they wanted to or not. They all came to realize the monster they harbored in the depths of their minds. I never wanted to admit that part of me existed, you see. I intended to muster up all my courage and goodwill, but not only did I fail to accomplish my goals, I also ended up producing the worst possible results. Mr. Ukita, that's just... Natsuhiko tried to say something, but he couldn't find the words. Ukita shook his head as if to say, it's fine, and continued, I should apologize to you kids too. Huh? The truth is that my actions triggered this incident in the first place. Naturally, Natsuhiko knew that. He learned the whole details of what led up to the incident from Ukita's memory. He knew all the hardships Ukita faced as he came to cause this incident, and how he felt throughout it all. That's how I've always been. No matter how much I act in accordance with my beliefs, it always turns out for the worse. I drag so many people into my mess, and in the end, I can never save anyone. And look what I've gotten everyone into now. I guess with justice as fragile as mine, I should never have acted on it, should I? Natsuhiko pondered those words. Mr. Ukita's methods were indeed flawed in some places. It wasn't as if Ukita had acted in accordance with a perfect sense of justice. There should have been another way, but Yuri did not judge him. But Mr. Ukita, it's because of your desire to save us that Hikin and I were finally able to see each other. Even if you were mistaken, it's all because you persisted in acting in accordance with your beliefs. So, well, I'm not sure if it'll be any consolation to you for me to say this, but thank you. When Ukita heard her words of gratitude, he smiled faintly. No, that's a real lifesaver. I tried to save you, but you saved me from myself. The situation's all sorts of backwards. I guess you're right. Yuri smiled at those words. Natsuhiko smiled as well, and he turned to his thoughts. Mr. Ukita's probably okay now. He had a strong sense of justice to begin with, after all. Now that Ukita was free from malice and regretted his actions, he'd probably be a reassuring ally to them now. Ukita himself spoke while gazing at the door Watase left through. I know I'm in no place to speak so arrogantly like this, but I'd like Captain Kasasagi to reconsider his ways once more. I can understand why you'd obsess over completing the mission in light of how it's created so many victims already, but still, that blockhead's not going to change his mind that easily, I'd say. Watase's still on board with Q. As long as he's fixated on revenge, there's probably no changing his mind. It was probably already an internalized belief to Watase. No, isn't it more than that? In the deepest depths of Watase's mind lay a hatred and fear of communicators, and Natsuhiko had a power that Watase feared. And perhaps as long as Natsuhiko would use that power, he and Watase would never be able to come to a mutual understanding. But even so, this is the path I chose. To protect Yuri, I have no choice but to keep using this power and casting strict words at Watase until he changes his beliefs. And perhaps if he couldn't do that, then Natsuhiko and Watase would never come to a mutual understanding, for all eternity. Will the antagonism between communicators and ordinary people continue forever, in the same way that the two of us can't come to terms? The thought made Natsuhiko depressed. Mr. Ukita, will there ever come a time in society where communicators and ordinary people can come to terms with each other? That's what the research in Labo was really meant to accomplish, wasn't it? Naturally, that's what I believe in, but that's not what the high-ranking officials at Labo think. The reason we devote ourselves to BC research is ostensibly for the benefit of public order and to prevent societal insecurity, but the real motivation is, in short, money. Money? Indeed, Labo conducts world-leading BC research and sells their results to various countries. You see, there's this foreign company called Beetlejuice New Treatments that's a patron of Labo and Brokume City. The three of them are co-conspirators in a money-making scheme. If that weren't the case, Labo wouldn't even dare conduct research on confined test subjects. If it really were for the sake of public order, they could simply confine them, maybe even let them live a peaceful life on an uninhabited island. But they don't. They use them for human experimentation. That said, the masterminds behind it all wouldn't just lay their true intentions out on the table, would they? That makes me sick. Indeed. That's why it's actually more favourable for them to aggravate the antagonism between communicators and ordinary people, so... Just then Yuri interrupted Ukita before he could continue. No, Mr. Ukita, in the past there were people who indeed conducted research for the sake of public order. Huh? For example? For example, there's AD. AD's formal name is Alone Desire. In other words, a drug for those who desire solitude. A drug to reject BC. The power to connect people. Natsuhiko gasped. True enough, with continued dosage of AD, a communicator would be no different from an ordinary person. Or used the other way around, an ordinary person could come into contact with communicators without fear. If AD became widespread, the communicators would no longer be seen as special as they are today. I've heard that was the reason for the development of the drug. You say that, but I worked my way up into Labo, all the way to junior fellow status, yet I've never heard that AD was developed for that purpose at all. I can imagine. AD has apparently been continuously in development ever since Labo was established. What I believe happened is that over the course of several years, Labo's ethics shed, little by little, until the original purpose of AD was forgotten. I'm not exactly sure what was on the developer's mind when they gave AD its name at the start of its development, but don't you think they put their feelings into the name, regardless of what those feelings were? I think that's a little overly sentimental, but Ukita didn't completely reject Yuri's line of thought. Natsuhiko likewise just barely agreed. But are there any other examples besides that? There are. The fact of the matter is that the WX particle amplifier itself is one. The amplifier? What part of that thing is supposed to bridge the gap between communicators and ordinary people? Yuri calmly replied, Hikaden, do you understand exactly what the WX particle amplifier is? It amplifies the energy content of BC particles. The energy content of BC particles rises when a communicator uses BC, remember? The information energy created inside their brain is emitted outside, which in other words means, Natsuhiko gasped in surprise, a normal person could use that to have BC abilities? No way. BC particles have the property of transmitting and propagating the information energy of living creatures' thoughts, in which case amplifying their energy meant, you see, there's a kind of artificial brain inside that machine. Yuri calmly made that statement. An artificial brain? Is such a thing even possible with modern technology? Creating an entire brain from scratch would indeed be difficult, so a more fitting way to describe it would be a device that mimics the BC receptor alone, an artificial BC receptor. A BC receptor, the organ related to BC usage located in the prefrontal cortex of the human brain. Natsuhiko had heard about it once in one of Enna's lectures. Was that true? Unmistakably, after all, we test subjects have always cooperated in the research and development of that machine. What? That machine was constructed 14 years ago when Labo was established. It was built based off the data obtained from the first test subject, Subject A, and improved based on the data obtained from the other test subjects. Miss A passed away before I came to Labo, and Ian and I never had the opportunity to meet face to face, but that machine is constructed from the data we produced. The BC we used, its foundation was built from parts of our very minds. And what was made was a machine that only generates powerful information energy, without a will, without a spirit. The generation of WX particles is, so to speak, the transmission of BC without any sort of message imbued within. All that exists within is a vague feeling. That feeling is the primal objective of the ability, known as BC, the desire to connect people. Is that what it was? Natsuhiko noticed that what Yuri said was the answer to a question he hadn't even considered up until then. Why would an environment full of WX particles increase the efficiency of BC usage? The answer was that WX particles themselves are filled with the desire to connect people. But you know, WX particle energy is too strong. They cause damage when they enter the human brain. They also affect the genes, causing mutations. The desire that WX particles have is to connect people. Even if it causes pain. Even if it recreates their bodies. So the cases where WX particle exposure causes aptitude to rise were because of that? Yes, though the number of people who can withstand that change is exceedingly small, but this effect definitely had the most potential to bridge the gap between communicators and ordinary people. After all, though it's compatible with only a very few select people, the machine is still able to create acquired communicators. The WX particle amplifier has the opposite use of AD. It's a machine that can turn ordinary people into communicators. Perhaps someday everyone on Earth could become a communicator through the use of that machine, and thus the disputes between communicators and normal people will come to an end. Apparently some people in Labo thought that way. Did you think that's really a good thing? Say, Hikaden, I believe that a society like that would be extremely unnatural. That maybe we should all try to understand each other without relying on this power of ours. Yuri, what are you trying to say? Well, I don't want you to erase Captain Kasasagi's memory. Huh? Even Captain Kasasagi could possibly come to an understanding if we talk it out. He can change his mind naturally, right? But using sense sympathy is a completely different matter. People change with just the slightest distortion of memory, you know. I think that erasing their memory would be the same as killing their mind. Yuri's lonely words struck Natsuhiko in his heart, but the same had happened to him as well. The memories Yuri had fabricated had caused Natsuhiko to live with a phantom for 9 years. The things Subject N and Natsuhiko had done were the same as well. Subject N's distortion of Watase's memory transfigured him into a homicidal demon. And when Natsuhiko erased his memories, Watase subsequently became just a rescue worker. People's personalities are formed from their memories, so erasing someone's memories is the same as killing them mentally. As Natsuhiko fell silent, Yuri continued, For some reason or other, we've acquired an ability that's more than we can handle, haven't we? The power to touch people's minds and manipulate them freely. Quite the terrifying power. If we use that power for our own gain without any hesitation, then that means we really are monsters, just like Watase had said, perhaps. Even if they weren't lumps of malice like Subject N, they would be entities quite close to her. But even so, Natsuhiko shook his head at Yuri's words. But even so, I'd do it all for you. No. Seriously, think about it. At this rate, Watase's going to take you away at the end. Let me ask you once more, Yuri. Are you sure you're okay with that? The only way to set you free is for Watase to change his mind. It'd be great if he himself reconsidered by the time we leave Labo, but if that doesn't happen, then I'll take matters into my own hands and... But before Natsuhiko could finish his sentence, a sound rang out from outside the door. Natsuhiko and the others gasped and turned around. Who's there? Watase? No answer. But they could hear a sound like someone pounding on the wall outside. Did Miss Tachibana or someone else realize the existence of the shelter? Wait, but even if that's the case, nobody but us should know the password. And even if the off chance someone does remember the keypad on the wall and repaired it, they wouldn't be able to come in. The kids were relieved at Ukita's statement, but immediately afterwards, the screeching sound of metal cutting... It's Jun. Metal cutting metal echoed on the other side of the door. Meanwhile, Watase was in the surveillance room, attempting to fix the broken PA. If he could get it working, then they could call together everyone who'd been infected by malice, in theory at least. It's been about an hour since they announced the place was switching to backup power. That means the speakers are still online, yet the PA can't handle facility-wide broadcasts anymore. That means that there's a good chance that one of the PA system circuits located near the surveillance room has been severed. He searched the area under that assumption, discovering a burned-off cable in the wall of the room that had been hit by the backdraft earlier. This is it, if I can just connect this... A thought crossed Watase's mind as he repaired it. He was remembering the conversation he'd had with Natsuhiko. Once I brought everyone here, and the malice erasure is complete, you no longer have a use for me. You're just going to erase my memory again, aren't you? What makes you say... He'd figured out Natsuhiko's true intentions from that reaction alone. The boy really had been planning on erasing Watase's memories eventually. Well, can't blame him, he's no saint after all. Any normal boy out there would want to protect the girl most precious to them. I'd probably do the same as Natsuhiko if I was in his shoes. But he was still afraid. He was still afraid of the inevitable moment where Natsuhiko would betray him. Watase had looked into communicators the best he could, but their true power was far greater than anything Watase had imagined. There were people out there who could dive into people's minds and manipulate their memories as they saw fit. There was nothing that frightened Watase more than that. He remembered what had told Natsuhiko in order to stave off that fear. Well, erase it if you want, for all I care. Just know the moment you do, that makes you a monster in the truest sense of the word. Now that I've said all that, all I can do is hope Natsuhiko has a change of heart. After all, I'm no match for him. There were only two ways to avoid having his memories erased by Natsuhiko. The first was to leave Q and abandon his mission to secure a test subject, and the other one was to wait for Natsuhiko to see things his way. It'll be a cold day in hell before that happens. I highly doubt any communicators would agree with our ideals. It was because they knew the fact that Watase and Ukita had resorted to terrorism. But just as he couldn't get Natsuhiko to agree with him, neither could he abandon his mission. If he cast aside his duty at this point, then all he'd have to show for it was several victims. But Okume City and Labo's wrongdoings would continue, as would their cover-up of the truth. More and more people would have their human rights spat upon, be stripped of their freedom, and live a tortured existence. Why can't you understand that, Natsuhiko? You could say that to him. Your girl was confined in Labo for years too. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Their wills were clashing fiercely against one another. Watase felt the grip of melancholy upon his heart. Damn it, I feel like I could have gotten along with you if I'd been the way I was before. Things were much better before I got my memories back. Just as Natsuhiko had said, now that he had his memories back, he was far past the point of no return. Watase suddenly felt like he'd gone somewhere very far away. Is it just me, or something like this happened before? It was back when Kazami and I... before he could finish the thought, he finished fixing the cable. Watase pushed his thoughts aside and dashed back to the surveillance room. Well, I got nothing to lose by trying. He flipped on the switch for the PA's mic as he thought that. And then he tried talking into it. Testing, and was met with the sound of his voice coming out of the speaker on the ceiling above him at the same time. Yes, I did it! It's working! Watase celebrated and then prepared to try and call for Sully first. But at that moment he noticed someone being displayed on one of the room's several monitors. Wasn't that Mortabe? The image was coming from the camera located in B1 of Area 5's outer ring. Said camera was busted, so the footage was of poor quality, but he could still barely make out Jun. She was holding her engine cutter and pushing it against the wall. Oh crap, did she notice the secret room? Destroying the shelter's opening mechanism had backfired on them. Anyone would get suspicious when something like that hadn't been damaged from before was suddenly destroyed the next time they saw it. Mortabe hates the old man. He's in danger. Watase rushed out of the surveillance room with that thought. That door should still hold for a while, even against that engine cutter. I just have to get to the shelter before she breaks through it. Watase continued his mad dash for Area 5, but he soon came to a halt. He could see a shadow standing in his way, though it was too dim to tell who it was. The shadow stared at him and spoke. Where are you going, Captain Kasasagi? Ina then pointed a gun at Watase. Jesus. Alright, well, we're at our half-hour point, so I say we wrap this one up here. Things are going a bit pear-shaped, and we haven't got our next victim to have their memories fixed. I'm assuming that means Jin's going to be next, because we're going to have to stop her engine cutting their way through the door. Or it could be Ina, or both. Guess we'll see. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for getting out to me, and I'll see you in the next one.